South African scientists say an explosion of COVID-19 cases around Johannesburg has peaked just 1 month after the fast-spreading Omicron variant was first detected in the region.
So, I think we can all come to the conclusion that 2021 was yet another unbearably strange year. But what's pretty odd to me is the fact that many music fans also seem to have come to the conclusion that 2021 was simply a boring year for music, and I couldn't disagree more.
It's fair to call 2021 a giant disappointment, right?
But I understand where they're coming from. We're all so burnt out in the current political and social climate that an effort like looking for music can feel arduous and taxing nowadays. And I get it. Sometimes I too can turn into the stuffy old grandpa claiming there's no more good music nowadays. And there's no shame in feeling that way, because music can lose its enjoyability a lot, especially if music is tied to what you're doing for a living. But I still feel that 2021 has been just as good a year for music as any other. There's always a wealth of hidden treasures that feel like a gold mine once you've heard them. In fact, there were so many incredible releases from this year that I couldn't even include on this list. If I had, I would probably never finish the video. So without further ado, let's get right into my top 10 albums of 2021. Elie Rossell of Mercury Prize-winning four-piece Wolf Alice is a pioneer in sensitivity. Her ability to empathetically move with the tide in whatever song she is singing was introduced on the popular single Don't Delete the Kisses off the band's 2017 release Visions of a Life, where Rossell expresses the anguish that stems from heartbreak but holds no resentment for her ex-partner. This form of radical love in the aftermath of a breakup is echoed in the newer tracks off Blue Weekend, like Safe from Heartbreak, If You Never Fall in Love, No Hard Feelings, and How Can I Make It Okay? On Delicious Things, Rossell grapples with visiting Los Angeles and her internal thoughts of paranoia that she'll end up trapped in the Hollywood industrial complex if she stays too long. The groundswell of instrumentation on the album is super maximal in every sense of the word. Its grandiosity beautifully magnifies the bare emotionality that Rossell generously expresses on each track. Just listen to that climactic swell on the opening track, The Beach. Ellie's songwriting has developed a great deal, and the ambitious musical prowess on this album is just mind-meltingly remarkable. I have no qualms in saying that this is Wolf Alice at their best. If Little Simz isn't on your radar yet, it's inevitable that she will be. Clocking in at 19 tracks, her newest release, Sometimes I Might Be Introvert, doesn't have one single filler. It's that masterfully sequenced. The overarching theme shows Simz unraveling the internal conflict stemming from the level of fame she's reached in recent years. She wrestles with the split between her public and private life against reggae-esque instrumentals and dramatized orchestral swells on songs like the opening track Introvert and the climactic Standing Ovation. The track I Love You, I Hate You is a cutting open letter to her absent father. And on Gems, an interlude that marks a major turning point on the album, we get to hear Simz' internal monologue reminding herself to put her well-being first.
Honestly, more time I feel like I'm stuck between a rock and a hard place.
But understand, you're human. Be proud.
Other highlights include the abrasive, spine-cracking bass on the braggadocious Speed, the celebratory and anthemic ode to the women who have inspired her throughout the years on the song Woman, and the effortless minimal groove on Rolling Stone. It's a crowning achievement in Simz' run of flawless records, and I can't wait to see what direction she swings in next.
Give me my checks and give me my plaques. Want breakdowns and I'll...
They cover the building. Sean Carter, Island. I wave with the businessman.
The reason why I love post-punk so much is because of how urgent and immediate it sounds. The snappy, chittering guitars never fail to get me in a shoulder-shuffling mood, and there aren't many rules either. It's very cathartic because vocally, band leaders can whoop and holler and just screech with abandon if they choose to. It's the perfect medium for DIY musicians who may not be classically trained. Not that there's anything wrong with being classically trained, but I find that there's a real liberation in not always knowing what the hell you're doing, which always comes to the fore on so many great post-punk records. Squid's latest album, Bright Green Field, is a shining example of this, combining all those elements that I love so much into an overtly political hodgepodge of jazz, funk, krautrock, dub, and punk. From the dystopian GSK, where lead singer Ollie Judge ruminates on heading towards a future where all social needs are dominated by the economic needs of late capitalism and pharmaceutical companies, to the harrowing 8 minutes of Narrator, where Judge plays the unreliable male narrator, and guest vocalist Martha Skye Murphy takes on the female lead, desperate to break free from this archaic narrative that the male narrator has created. This is probably one of the best projects I've ever heard.
I play my part.
If you grew up on the internet, chances are you've heard the name Left at London before. Also known by her name Nat Puff, she's pretty ubiquitous on social media for her infectious charisma and humorous charm, which allowed her to master the technique of going viral several times.
Hi, I'm Left in London. This is how you make a Tyler the Creator song. First start with a shitty piano and pick a fucking chord.
But Nat will be the first to tell you that this all comes entirely secondary to her music. She's always been an incredibly talented and seasoned singer-songwriter and producer. Mike the Snare recently called her the hyperpop Elliott Smith and the singer-songwriter Playboy Cardi. TIAPFYH, a double acronym for 2 tracks on the album There Is a Place for You Here and This Is a Protest for Your Heart, was conceived during Nat's time at the Shoreline Artist Residency Program in Washington, and this album is a crowning jewel in her already impressive portfolio. The opening track, Pills and Good Advice, borders on an epic synth rock opera and on the more stripped down ballad of Marian Zajanczek. Nat grapples with her own struggles with mental illness through the lens of a former congressman who pushed for the New Deal and ultimately succumbed to his mental illness, which was never properly treated. I had the pleasure of interviewing Nat on my podcast last month, and when asked what song she was most proud of, she said that her favorite was Kudzu, a spiraling rumination on sobriety and recovery.
What would you say was one particular part of the album where you surprised yourself?
Definitely Kudzu. I made that song in like 2 days, and it's one of my favorites that I've ever made, and I still don't know why it's like one of my least streamed. I just love it so fucking much. I love the way it sounds. I love its message. I love the way it grooves. I love the Willie Crook sample. I love everything about it.
And I still can't listen to the song There Is a Place for You Here in public without crying. Nat knows exactly what she's doing, whether her vocals are stretched and altered beyond recognition or laid bare on the tracks where more acoustic concessions are made. She welcomes the listener in with open arms, promising it's never too late to start over. Regardless of what's happened to you in the past, Left at London has a place for you here.
A warning aviators firing a bazooka.
If you thought I was done raving about post-punk, you'd be dead wrong. It's hard to believe that this is only Dry Cleaning's debut full-length project, and what an opening statement it is. The dark, abstract lyricism and androgynous detached vocals of charismatic frontwoman Florence Shaw has always been a point of intrigue for me. Her narration is dry and sardonic, contextualizing and recontextualizing the world around her through eavesdropped conversations and online comments. The dynamic tunnels of whirring guitar feedback and the full-bodied percussion throughout the project makes it impossible to ignore. It's sonic youth for the TikTok generation. The fall if Marky Smith read Twitter instead of Nietzsche. It behooves me how on earth Shaw comes up with all these odd arrangements of words.
Just an emo dead stuff collector.
I still have no idea what an emo dead stuff collector is, but I simply don't care. You don't need to understand what Shaw is talking about to enjoy it. In fact, that's actually a major part of the draw, and I can only hope that dry cleaning continues to go up from here. If Snail Mail's Lush and Habit were Lindsey Jordan's humble introduction to audiences around the world, Valentine is her grand Shakespearean-level opus. The album unabashedly traverses her struggle with heartbreak, rehab, being new to adulthood, and how falling in love can be deeply inconvenient and terrifying a lot of the time. It was so nice to hear Jordan's newly unapologetic use of female pronouns in her love songs after keeping her love life on the down low for the past few years. It was a particular treat to see the music video for the title track, where Jordan plays an 18th century chambermaid who murders her lover's spouse. We also get to hear Jordan express a maternal urge to protect her younger self and further distance herself from the innocent naivete expressed on her debut album Lush. This is at least 10 steps up the ladder for Lindsey Jordan, and I'm already on the edge of my seat anticipating which direction she'll go in next. If you aren't aware of Lael Neal, she's a Los Angeles-based folk singer-songwriter who signed to Sub Pop around 5 or 6 years ago, and her music is just indescribable. She grew up on a farm in Virginia where she immersed herself in the writings of John Steinbeck and Mary Oliver, which clearly has bled into her music. Her mystical acoustic folk songs are very minimal, bare, and stark naked, with weeping melodies on tracks like Blue Vein, Every Star Shivers in the Dark, and How Far Is It to the Grave, where she utilizes the omnichord, a portable synthesizer with preset string rhythms which has the ability to produce otherworldly sounds. This was the perfect soundtrack of this year for a lone wolf like myself. I seriously just urge you, go listen to this album. Seriously, if you haven't listened to it, pause this video and go listen to it. It will be the best decision you've made all day. Anyone who claims fast hard rock is dead simply isn't paying attention. And the ferocious Aussie quintet Amyl and the Sniffers only proves the vitality of this genre is not only alive and well, but it's continuing to innovate under the radar. Fronted by the spunky and charismatic Amy Taylor, Amyl and the Sniffers have already made significant waves with their 2019 self-titled debut. They've frequently been compared to AC/DC, which I guess I understand, but I don't really see it that way. I find them to be much more reminiscent of Wendy O and the Plasmatics. Comfort to me ramps up the volume significantly, with face-melting guitar solos and whip-smart political commentary on the future moving into a high-tech dystopia and infringements on women's rights. Every song is one banger after another. Amy Taylor rips, roars, and claws her way through the fabric of every listener's conscience, demanding every last ounce of their attention. And it's just glorious. I've had a keen eye on Spelling since the release of her 2017 album Pantheon of Me. This and her 2019 follow-up Maisie Fly both received widespread critical acclaim, with the former becoming Bandcamp's #4 album of the year, and The Guardian dubbing Spelling's intricate compositions like Solange looking into a haunted mirror. With her 2021 full-length release The Turning Wheel, Spelling took on the task of self-producing and orchestrating the album herself and recruiting an ensemble of 31 collaborators to bring her ambitious vision to life. over dark retro soul and chamber pop comprised of strings, harps, piano, banjo, bassoon, among an array of otherworldly instruments. Spelling weaves her intricate myth-making into disarming fairy tales that are about the furthest one can get from the comforting fantasies that we are read as bedtime stories in our childhood. The album's name itself is borrowed from a line in Rumpelstiltskin, a tale in which an imp spins straw into gold for the very high price of an unborn child. There is no doubt that this has been Spelling's year, and I can't imagine any of these newfound accolades going to anybody else. Now, before we get to my number one pick, let's get to some honorable mentions and some subscriber favorites. I've always been a maximalist at heart. You can call this album what you want, but whether you find it virtuosic, gimmicky, or pretentious, I think we can all agree that it's certainly not boring. Black Country New Road releases something, you can guarantee I'll pull up and listen to it. Lorraine is one of the most exciting innovators in the underground, blending metaphysical tapestries of sound under the umbrella of R&B, avant-garde art rock, post-punk, and industrial rock. The way she unravels her feelings of grief and loss in a myriad of sonic and lyrical sequencing comes to a head on this album, and it's absolutely glorious. Unless you've been living under a rock, there's no doubt that the heights that post-punk duo Wet Leg have been reaching with their silly, irreverent, and effortlessly catchy dance earworms has been well deserved. They're almost mainstream now, with several late-night appearances under their belt just in this year alone, and I'm eagerly anticipating what they'll be cooking up for us after this. This album is Michelle Zauner's most ambitious project yet, and a fluid example of pop's ability to stretch and bridge the gap between Pacific Northwest indie, twee, dream pop, shoegaze, and more. Zauner has claimed that this album is a sigh of relief and a much-needed burst of joy after losing her mother to cancer, and it was well worth the wait after her 4-year hiatus from music. This is Tyler in his prime. This album is fun, it's braggadocious, it's irreverent, and it's self-aware. It's Tyler, just a more fully realized Tyler.
Feels like a maracas. You don't care who hears.
This neo-post-punk album of duets is a masterclass in precision and impact. Shoo Shoo's Jamie Stewart and Angela So always bring out the best in their collaborators. They simply never miss.
Maybe I could be a diamond, heavy on the sheet.
A loose concept album based on the Greek legend of Sisyphus of Ephyra, Lala Lala's I Want the Door to Open is one of the most emotionally corrosive and grandiose odes to the labor and liberation of life on Earth.
let me in. Give me yours, I'll show you mine.
Annika. My god, where do I even begin? This album was 11 years in the making and a product of the most stringent periods of COVID-induced isolation during lockdown. Unlike her previous albums that she's made with bands like Beak and Exploded View, Annika's voice on this record is front and center and no longer obscured by the instruments. The listener gets to really appreciate what she has to say in its entirety, and the fact that she was able to come up with these spellbinding synth patterns, drum loops, and poignant lyrical poetry culled straight from her diary on the spot really adds a layer of authenticity to her unrelenting and undying hope for a better world.
I think we can change, I think we can change.
What were your favorite albums of 2021? Make sure to leave them in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you all in 2022.